Welcome back to the Training Babble podcast. I'm your host, Dave Schell, and today is what I hope will be the first of many of a series of a little bit different thing that we're doing, which is spotlighting some of the athletes I've worked with. And so we'll call this the Athlete Spotlight. And today I have the pleasure of being joined by Megan Onweller. I think we've worked together for about 3 years at this point. I think we're going on 3.
I think it's 3-ish.
Yeah. So, for people that aren't familiar with you from the ground up, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a athlete, as Dave has taught me to call myself, but really I just really like bikes a lot and needed release from life. So I'm a mom and I work full time at a really cool pet company. So if you like pets, you're cool. If you don't, you suck. So I was one of the people that fell into the category of if you work full time and you have kids, then you put yourself 3rd, 4th, 5th, whatever number you end up in that category, and kind of lost that part of myself. But traditionally growing up, I was an athlete. So I was an athlete in high school and very competitive. And I think I kind of took that out in my work life, but forgot what it was like to compete anywhere else until I started riding bikes and sucked at it. And so I had to get a coach. And that's what Dave's been helping me with. Now I'm just...
So let's start there. You were an athlete in high school. So what sports did you do? And what was it that drew you to that sport? Like, what was it about the competition that you enjoyed?
So I played a bunch of sports, but my primary in high school, was softball and swimming. And then swimming became kind of like my everything. Like I was captain of the swim team junior, senior year. I was breaking state records. I was just like all about swimming. And that came from a place of, I think, an individual sport where, you know, you're definitely working with a team, kind of like softball, but your success was all on you. So like if you wanted to get better, if you wanted to get faster, it was all about the time you put in, the commitment you put in. I got told by a lot of people, like, if you didn't start swimming when you were a kid, you would never swim well. And I remember my freshman year when I tried out, I sucked really bad. Like I remember trying to do a flip turn and like choking on water and almost dying and thinking, oh, okay, I don't know if I can do this. And then, you know, it was the first time in my life where when you put time and effort, you saw a real tangible result after. And so before I knew what I was doing, practices before school, practices with the team after school, swimming on the weekends, and just really high on that continuous improvement. Like it just felt really good. I was not book smart in school. I had to try for every grade I had. And so like this was the first space, I guess, that I felt came really naturally to me. And I felt like I was really thriving. So that was kind of my high school peak was, you know, swimming.
I could throw a football over those mountains.
That's right.
So, and I told you before we started recording that my goal is to get you to cry on the podcast.
Oh,
boy. And so let's talk about, you graduated high school.
Yeah.
And then did you continue any sort of sport or anything outside of high school? And then what brought you back? How'd you find cycling?
So I told you I was all in on swimming. I was going to swim in school. You know, I had prospects. My swimming coach at the time was like, you know, you beat the state record, the chances of you getting into swim somewhere, you know, were high. And I was feeling really good about that. I tore my ACL at the end of the season, my senior year. And it was a small injury that I could have come back very easily from. But it put me in a really crappy place mentally. And this was a perfect example of attitude is everything. And I had a crappy attitude about it. And I just kind of gave up. And from there, I, married really young and just kind of followed a different path. I didn't even want to think about the work that would have to be done to like get myself back into shape and in a place where I could compete again. Because in my head, if I missed the boat for college or collegiate sports, then I didn't think that there was anything out there. So I just didn't focus on it for a really long time. I played like beer league softball here and there, but never really got into any sports. I was traveling a bunch as an executive. I think I traveled 80%, and my kid was little, and my life was work and kids. That was kind of it for me. And it wasn't until 2020 when I was literally grounded and stuck at home, where 80% of my life was chaos, was all of a sudden at home. And I was like forced to like really pay attention to myself. And that was really hard because I did not like what I saw. And like having that realization of like, this is not who you are. What are you doing? Is like very deep, very heavy. And I think a lot of people went through that during COVID of like, okay, right. the distractions of everyday life aren't there. Now what do I do? What do I focus on? Mental health was in a rough place. And so my sister had just gotten hurt and she was a runner and started riding. And she was like, why don't you just get a bike in the basement? Cause I was talking about getting a Peloton. I was one of those people. No offense to Peloton people. It's great. If that's your thing. But it made sense to get a bike and put it on a trainer. I just didn't like know where to start. And I found this really cool group of people online. They were called the Drafting Dinos, and they were just like an online Facebook group in the Zwift world. And so I was just trying to immerse myself and understand what that was. And it was like complete strangers all over the world helping me with things like people getting on phone calls and helping me set up my bike the first time. And I remember my first group ride was a tour of the Alpe de Zwift. And they're like, not every ride is like this. We promised. I'm like, this is awful. I hate this. What is happening? And I primarily just rode inside for like that social aspect that I didn't get anymore. And I was able to stay home, and it was really easy to manage and balance. And then somewhere along the line, someone was like, I mean, you can take the bike off the trainer and like ride outside. And I was like, oh, that scares me. I don't want to do that. And that's where I kind of decided, well, why not? I'll try it. So that was when I got my first gravel bike. And I remember I got it for my birthday, and I had a goal to ride, I think it was 35 miles on my 35th birthday or 36. I don't know. I don't know how old I was. I can't remember anymore, but I remember that was so damn hard.
Right.
No training, just hop on the bike, no fit, no knowledge of like anything, clipping in the first time. Just like, I think I had Velcro shoes. Again, no offense if Velcro shoes are your thing. They were like Walmart Velcro shoes. They were not like, they probably were the wrong size. It was the most painful ride ever.
So I just want to pause right there, because I think I think a lot of people would have a very similar story to yours, and like me as well. Like I started working in Training Peaks in 2012. And at that time, like everything I had to ride in was like from Walmart and stuff like that. Right. Yeah. And so like all of a sudden I'm working with all these people that like have all the base layers and leg warmer, like just all this stuff. And yeah, so it's funny to like think about where we came from. We forget about it, but it's like everybody starts at that place where it's like we have no idea what you're supposed to wear, or like how it's supposed to look.
Yeah, I mean, and there's almost like a niceness to the blissful unawareness of that time frame. Like if I really think about it, like the judgment that comes into play later in the game, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but just being blissfully unaware and like riding in whatever, but just riding was a big deal. And I remember getting back and
no devices.
no
right?
devices. I think I had my
A
Apple
wrist
Watch, and
watch or something.
I was just like, yeah, Apple Watch, I think at the time, and nothing else, like no concept of speed, cadence, anything. It was just riding and mileage. And I remember getting home. I think it took me, this is embarrassing, but we all start somewhere. I think it took me like over 4 hours, or something like that, numerous breaks to get that done, and it just feeling really hard. But there was something that happened when I got home, and I remember I sat down on my front porch, and I had done it, right? I did what I said I was going to do. And it was the familiar feeling of something being hard and completing it and being like, oh, I did that really hard thing that was familiar. It reminded me of probably swimming or any of the other hard things, right, that I've done. So I was like, okay. And then from there, it was all about just trying to learn more. I started doing some Zwift races. I got a coach somewhere around that time frame just to, I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. I just knew I was doing something wrong.
Yeah. What was the initial inspiration to get a coach?
I think I had this, I was racing and I was progressing, but I was feeling really lack of energy. Like I wasn't feeling like some of the other athletes that I was racing with. Like we would do a race and then I wouldn't see progression. And so I would just ride more. And I think I was using that high school mentality of like, okay, well, I'll just put more hours in the pool and I'll get better. But I wasn't valuing two things, which are very important that you taught me, but it was rest and it was nutrition. And I think that I was, vastly under fueling, but also I think I was racing on Tuesday and Thursday all out. I was doing a survival Sunday ride, which was usually pretty hard, longer ride. And I was doing group rides every other day in between. So there was no rest. And there, when you race twice a week, balls to the walls, there's obviously something there that I was missing that I had to kind of learn and figure out.
Yeah. I think that's also a very common thing. And I don't know if it's an American thing or what, but there's like the no pain, no gain mentality, or if it doesn't hurt, it's not effective. And I think a lot of people are that way. And I always use this example. I used to teach spin classes at Gold's Gym, and there were people there that would just go from class to class to class. And it was more about filling the burn or burning calories or whatever, right? And it's like, which is fine if you want to exercise. And you and I have had the same discussion. Like, there's a difference between training and exercise. If all you're wanting to do is like burn calories and fill the burn, that's fine. Like, more power to you. But if you're wanting to improve and get faster, that might look different. And so, yeah, I guess let's take a step back. Working with your first coach, what was that experience like? And what were your initial kind of like ahas or insights?
I think she was a great coach, but she, for me personally, I needed more realness, and everything that I did, it was like, great job, great job, great job. And I think for some people that's really good, but I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm very self-aware. And so I wasn't gaining anything outside of what I already kind of knew from that coaching relationship. She did help me a ton with things like just, starting writing in general, the vernacular, buying my first pair of bibs and things like that. Definitely don't want to discredit any of that. But I think that at some point I just wasn't seeing any progress. And in fairness to her, I wasn't giving her feedback either. And so the two of us just weren't communicating well. And so for that reason, it didn't really work for me. If I had to do it all over again, I think if I had communicated some of my issues and thoughts, she would have probably given me what I needed and it would have been fine. But I was scared to be honest with her, which is so weird in a relationship that you pay for, right? I'm paying for a service.
Yeah.
and you know that I don't have any problem speaking my mind now, but I think that, you know, back then I was just different in general as a human. Like, when I say I've like cycled my way into figuring out who I am, that's really kind of what I did. And back then I was just very insecure about a lot of things. And so I just kind of told her I needed to take a break. And after my first like real race that I had signed up for, and I remember I was like, I think I was Zwifting that winter with the dynos, and then I was getting irritated because I couldn't cat up. And then I think that's when I connected with you. So, and then you told me I didn't know how to ride my bike. And I was like, what do you mean?
Yeah. So let's just take a little tangent here for a moment, a little detour. And yeah, I think like that it turned out to be somewhat true, right? I mean, if I think back, the first year, it was about learning to eat and rest. The second year is about learning to ride your bike. And then all of a sudden, the third year, you had this crazy jump and like got so strong. And I think this is something I want to do a podcast just on this, but like, I think a lot of people have this illusion that progress is linear and that it's just going to go up, up, up every week. And it's going to be, you know, like really predictable, but it's not. And I've heard it like, it's like the stock market. There's going to be ups and downs, but we're looking for a general upward trend to the right. If we're talking about power or fitness or whatever you want to call it. And so I like that I have to commend you about. Like, you were very patient. And I had another athlete like this too, where it's like, it doesn't necessarily like come right away, but you stuck with it. You had faith. And then all of a sudden it paid off. And it like what it would look like for a lot of people is like, oh, what workouts was I doing the last 2 to 3 months or something like that? But it's like, no, it's what you've been doing the last 2 to 3 years. Finally, all just like came together and you realized it. And so, yeah, talk about, I guess that first year, like just learning to eat and recover.
I mean,
like?
Eating for me and a lot of women is a very sensitive subject. It's a podcast, so you can't see me, but I'm damn near 6 foot tall and 200 pounds. And so my mindset of what a cyclist should be or needed to be was very taxing. And that comes from stigma of the universe, social media, whatever you want to call it. The evil comparison that you do when you're out riding. And I thought that strength needed to come from a place of me needing to lose weight. And in a desperate attempt to do so, I was just limiting myself to 1,200 calories a week, had no concept or understanding of how to fuel off the bike. I fueled well on the bike. And so I think I use that as an excuse to be like, well, I fuel while I ride, and that's fine. But what I ate in between was very minimal and not nearly enough. And I essentially threw my body into reds. And
for people that don't know what that is, it's relative energy deficiency syndrome, or now low energy availability is it's also being called. Yeah.
And it took me going to like an endocrinologist, and I mean, I think she was testing me for early menopause and all kinds of stuff, because like I went essentially because I wasn't having a regular period, and you know, your body will tell you these things, and I wasn't listening, and I thought it would be anything but the fact that I was under fueling. In reality, I was, riding 5 days a week ish, 5-6 days a week. And I was living on that 1,200 calories, maybe. And I remember like about to go to bed and checking my Fitness Pal and being like, oh shit, I'm only at 900 calories, and like chugging a protein shake really quick with milk because I needed the extra calories from the milk, and being like, okay, I'm good. Like It was chaos, and I felt like shit. And I never saw it until, my endocrinologist was like, your cortisol is this or whatever, and you're an athlete. And I think like, she didn't say I was in reds yet, but I was very close or approaching that space. And it is such a foreign concept to think I have to eat more to lose weight, but that's exactly what I had to do. And when I say eat more, it matters what you eat, right? Like I try really hard not to eat processed foods and garbage like that. I try to limit sweets to on the bike. I do a lot of things that are very mindful about my diet. But it's more of a lifestyle thing than a diet. And I also had to learn that just because I'm a bigger body doesn't mean that I can't crush a race or perform really well. It's just my 2.2 watts per kilo is very different than somebody else's. Like I Zwift with people and they're like, oh my God, you're holding 260. And I'm like, yeah, but I weigh, it's like, it's math that they don't understand.
No. And I think that's like one of the big issues with cycling. And we see it across the board. And I think Zwift maybe even makes it a bit worse because it's always on display, but it's power to weight. And we always hear, need to be lighter, need to be lighter, need to be lighter. And people are looking to buy the lightest bikes and like lose weight. And typically it's happening in season. So right as your training's ramping up, people want to like start cutting calories and stuff like that. But it's like, yeah, you and I have talked about it. It's like, there's different body types. There's different courses suit different athletes differently. And it's like, I mean, if you don't mind me sharing, like your FTP last year jumped up to 300 and there's a picture of you. Was it Unbound where you're pulling the guys? You're at the front and there's just a bunch of dudes behind you and you're like pulling them, and it's like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's something you learned is that like food is fuel. And it's like the other thing, and you and I had this conversation multiple times. It's like the scales are bullshit. It's like weight's going to go up and down from day to day and stuff like that. Yeah. It's the way your clothes are fitting. It's the way you look in the mirror. It's those sorts of things. And it like the scale doesn't really give you an idea of body composition. Even the ones that are like saying they do, they're questionable at best, I would say. Is like, but it's like if you're doing strength training and eating properly, you're going to put on more muscle, lean mass. And so even though you weigh the same, if your clothes aren't fitting the same, and that was the big thing with you is like, I want to say there was a point where like every week you're having to go buy more clothes because everything just kept getting loose and loose and loose on you.
Yeah. I mean, it was a big deal. So like, I was on From the Ground Up and one of the things that they do is they bring you these clothes. And I remember crying on the day that was supposed to be like this reveal where they give, your clothes from the sponsors and nothing fit. And it was really hard for me. And I remember when those became too big, that I was like, okay. Because again, the scale really didn't change that much. I think for me, learning to pay attention to my body, and I feel it now. So like if I go out, Saturdays are typically in season. It's snowy here in Minnesota, but Saturdays are my favorite because I do a group gravel ride. It's a big group. And so the point, at least for me and some of my friends and, my boyfriend is we go as hard as we can at the front. And it's just like this fun thing that we do. And it's the ride that I leave it all out there every week. And when I don't eat well, and it's twofold, right? If I don't eat well the night before and the morning of, you don't have energy, but I notice other things too. My heart rate's elevated. I'm in kind of my red line state.
Yeah.
And I can't get it. For me, it's like 155 and I can't seem to keep it under 160, 155 when I'm under fueled. My body wants more water, which is a problem on the bike sometimes because then you have to pee more and all the, so like there's all these other things that happen if I don't eat well. So when you start to I tell people, just listen to your body. It'll tell you a lot. Like screw all the metrics.
But that's the hard thing,
listen.
Right? It's like we're being inundated every day with devices and articles and all these things telling us that we need this supplement, we need this device, like all this stuff. And so it is hard to like get through that noise sometimes. But I agree 100% where it's like, if you can, and that's something we work on too, right? It's like, especially on the trainer, is just like really, I always call it like calibrating your inner power meter, where it's like getting a sense for what your breathing doing, what your heart rate's doing, how do your legs feel, and then look at your heart rate and then your power, and like always kind of like coordinating those or correlating those with like how you're feeling on the day. And it's going to vary from day to day. And I can't talk. So you started off like your big goal, and I have a very similar story. Like my big goal was running 6 miles, and it seemed like impossible at the time. And then it was like, once I achieved that, like that's what inspired me to be a coach, because I wanted to share that same feeling with other athletes. Your impossible thing started at 35 miles. And so how did that spark like where did you go from there? What was your next impossible thing?
Well, from there, I got a job in Minnesota. And so we were moving to Minnesota, and I remember knowing nothing about anything. I was like, I'm just going to sign up for a race. Like, you weren't my coach yet. I think I was just like looking for anything. And I had a gravel bike, and I signed up for a road race, and it was called Ride the Ridges in Winona, Minnesota. And it's beautiful along the like ridges, river bluffs. It's very hilly. It was like 100 and something miles and a mile of elevation gain, which at the time I thought was a lot. And that was my goal. So I think at that time it was like February, and the race was in September. And I remember just the training for that. And so it meant like more consistent, longer rides, more zone 2 training, and just like focusing on being able to finish that. I got like road wheels for my gravel bike and conned some friends into doing it with me. And that was like my first century, kind of first taste of like a distance ride and what that looked like. And it was hard, but it was really beautiful, and the camaraderie of like other people on the course. And like my sister came out, she had cowbells on every big hill. And so like I loved and hated seeing Jessica, because it was like, if I heard the damn bell, I knew a hill was coming, because she only placed herself like on a hill. And so it was like,
Smart.
she was out there, my kids are out there, and it was just like, oh my God, it was fun, but it was also traumatizing. But before that, I had to ride a lot more outside. And I think the scary thing that I'm most grateful for to this day was I had just moved here. I didn't know anyone. And I just found a group ride posted like on Facebook. And I think I was seeing a therapist at the time, because again, I was dealing with more than just physical challenges. I was like mentally trying to figure out who I was. And, she was like, I want you to do something out of character and, go to a mommy meetup or, group workout class or something. And I'm like, fuck a mommy meetup. Like, that's not me. I've never been great at that sort of thing. And so I found this gravel ride from the Hugo gravel group, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go. And I was in my Walmart kit and, all of that. And I remember showing up, and, there were varying degrees of like people who knew what they were doing and people who didn't. And there was a couple of people there that were like very accepting and just like, we're going to teach you everything we know on gravel. And it was my first gravel ride, and it was really hard because I'd only ever ridden on bike paths and Zwift. And so like being on a different terrain, and like, it was kind of scary. I remember being really scared, but like also I didn't know anyone, and I was trying to like show up and, not look like an ass a little bit. So, I went, I had I was the contraption captain. I had all this shit on my bike that I didn't need. And like, I was just there, and they were extremely accepting, and riding 30 to 50 miles with them every Saturday leading up to that race is probably what got me to be able to finish it. But it was also the first time I felt the acceptance of like a riding community. There's pros and cons to going out and riding in a group. Most of the time you get accepted, you find people, they're, on a no drop ride, they ride with you, you tell them your whole life story. They're there for you through all sort of things. Like I also had a divorce last year. So like, these people were along for the ride the entire time and super supportive, and even out often on the bike. Like they come to my kid's birthday party. It's just like they become very close with you, because when you ride together for 6-7 hours at a time, you learn things about each other. I will also say they're important, because you will show up for rides and people will say not nice things to you as well. I get, a lot of people judging me a book by its cover. It used to really discourage me. I probably put it in my training peaks 100 times, like, this fucking idiot said that I was slow because I'm a girl, or whatever, happens out there. Now I just kind of like smirk at them, like, okay.
And then drop them.
Yeah. And now I get things like I did, a global fat bike ride, and I was leading a fast group. And there was a couple people that, like, they just give you this look like, you're leading the fast group. And I'm like, oh, I'll pray for you, buddy. You'll be all right. And then halfway through the ride, they're the ones like forcing their food in, like, dying. And you're just like,
wind.
Are you guys okay? How's the pace? And it's just, I love it, because there's a lot of humility that happens. They almost always will tell me, like, I completely underestimated the ride today. And that's where I find a lot of, like, haha, like, it just feels good to kind of, and if, it's like an asshole thing to say, but it's like, I like validation. When people underestimate me, and I can show up and prove them wrong, just like from the ground up. The amount of people that told me I wouldn't make that first cutoff, I was like, I will kill myself, but I'm making this first fucking cutoff. Like, it's that's what's broken in me. I've learned, like, the more people that tell me I can't do something is just what makes me want to do it more. So it's kind of, it's my, I don't know that that's a broken flaw.
Trait. I think it can be good to an extent.
Yeah, that's true. But
so tell me about some of the things you alluded to it when we first started talking. Like, what are some of the challenges? You have a pretty high demanding job.
Yeah.
You've got 3 kids. What are some of the things you've struggled with as far as, I guess, making time for yourself and not feeling selfish?
I mean, as a mom, I think any time that you're not with your kids feels like time you should be giving them. There's just this weird social thing that a mom should be, like, running their kid around to every this, that, or whatever, or, sitting on the couch with them in the morning watching cartoons or whatever it is that they're doing. And that's a tough one to get over, giving up, like, your Saturday mornings with your kids to go ride. But I can say with confidence now, because my kids are older, I have 2 stepkids that are 18 and 21, and then my youngest is turning 11 in a couple weeks. And when, I first started riding, he was 7, and I got, a little tag along thing, and I would take him with me. He was like extra weight and great training. Or, his dad would meet me out halfway on a ride and ride with me. Like, there are things that you can do to compromise to kind of help mitigate that fear. But also, guys don't feel that. And they're dads too. So it's like, why the hell does it, like, just because you're a mom or a female, should it be different? I tell moms specifically all the time that are like, I want to ride more, but I feel so guilty, or they use the word I can't a lot. And you really do have to prioritize it. That's the hard part. So
right.
Yeah, you might have to get up at 5 a.m. to get your trainer ride in before everyone gets up, so that you're not giving up your evenings with homework and whatever. Or you may never watch TV again because your free time is on the bike now. Or if you watch TV, it's on the bike. So there's a lot of compromising that has to happen. But if it makes you better, and for me it does, I show up so much better as a mom when my head is clear, when I'm feeling good about myself, when I have, I'm able to spend time with my friends on the bikes and people that I care about, and just puts me in a better headspace to be a good mom. right? And I think that that's the important part that people need to understand, whether it's riding a bike or going for a run or swimming or crazy triathletes that do all three. Like whatever floats your boat, makes you happy, you should do it, because your kid's going to want a happy mom over a depressed mom or a stressed mom. And for me, you know, I have demanding work life too. Like, between the stress and not doing anything for myself, I was not showing up well in that space before cycling. So cycling for me is an area to get all that out. Like, I think I tell people, like, I was kind of a yelly mom. Like, I wasn't like screaming at anybody, but I definitely had a short temper, and I have way better patience now. Primarily because I work my shit out on the bike. So, you know, it's just kind of a balance, but you do have to choose it. You do have to prioritize it. You might have to change your schedule. You may have to give up something else. But it's definitely feasible. If I can do it, and I work 45 to 50 hours a week, and, you know, still train, I don't know how many hours I train, but, you know, it's significant, and I don't miss baseball games. I don't give up anything like that. Like, you know, I'm still making it happen.
Like, some of the stuff we did was when you'd have a long ride on a Saturday or something, you'd ride to the game, watch the game, and then ride home from the game. And so,
that's right.
And it's funny because these are, like, I'll take a little bit of issue with you saying that dads don't feel the same way. Because
I just talk to a lot of dads that don't feel that. I'm sure they do. That was stereotypical.
No,
I'm sorry, dads.
There's a social
don't
stigma
hate on me,
for sure.
dads.
Like, but I was a stay-at-home dad, and I always talk about, you know, I was getting into triathlon at that time, and so it's like I had to, like, tell athletes all the time, like, so I had the two kids at home, and one was in preschool, and then when they were in preschool and kindergarten, I'm like, man, when both kids are in school full time, my life's going to be so much easier. I'm going to have so much time. And then they were, but it's like there was always a teacher work day. A kid was always sick. There was some meeting something would always come up. Yeah. And so I just had to learn to squeeze in things like that. Like, we would have like one time we were having a family birthday party, and same thing. It's like I rode my bike to the birthday party, stayed there for the festivities, and then rode my bike home, because that's how I could fit it in that day. And so it's like, you just have to get creative. And I think the big thing is, and I think Training Peaks can be really bad at this, is like when you've got all the red on your calendar, it can be discouraging and stuff like that. And so I think,
it literally gives me a stomachache. Yeah.
So for me, it's like, as a coach, like, I've always really focused on, like, let's trying to find, like, what's sustainable, whether it's 5 hours or 8 hours or 15, like, whatever it is, whatever you can do with your life. And let's, like, just be really good and consistent with that. And so, like you said, it doesn't matter, like, you do the most with what, like, the hours that you have. And that's the important thing, and being consistent with that. So if a mom's out there listening to this and is thinking about getting into cycling, or thinking about signing up for the first big race or something like that, what would be your advice to them as far as taking those first steps?
Just start, right? Like, I think the hardest part about the whole thing is just getting on the bike the first time, or going for your first run, or whatever it is that you want to start. And each and every time after that gets a little bit easier. And as you find out more about yourself along the way, you can adjust. Like, there's no concrete, I started this way, so I have to continue that way the entire time. Like, you can change it. When my kids were little, it was like riding to the baseball field, watching the game, coming back. Or, you know, when I was training for Fat Bike Worlds, I tied Connor up on a sled behind my fat bike and pulled him around the neighborhood. You know, like, you got to get creative, and you can have fun with them, and they find joy in watching you too. And so involve them as much as you can, because they really do find a lot of joy in it. I have a great community of other moms that ride, like Joanna from the ground up. You know, she's got 2 sons. They both ride now. My son rides now. He got a fat bike for Christmas. And so, like, we just did we did 2 fat bike rides this weekend. And And sometimes they're great and sometimes they're not. The first one on Saturday, it was windy. So I think the wind chill, was like close to 7 degrees here in Minnesota. He bitched the whole time. I even asked him, I said, are you going to find any joy in this ride today? And he looked at me and he said, I don't know. And I said, okay, fair enough, but we finished it. And then yesterday we went for a group ride and he rode in the middle of the pack, absolutely crushed it. I had people come up to me like, oh my gosh, he's so strong. Like he did great today. And I'm like, should have seen him yesterday, but I didn't. He did really well. And I know the people I ride with really well. So I kind of rode off the front and kind of left him in the middle with some other folks that I know their pace that he could keep with. But involve people as much as you can to kind of help you and involve the kids and just do what you can and nothing more. Like if all you can do is one ride a week, okay, then you're doing one ride a week.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, you and I have talked about this.
You're not going to do 100 mile, but the other thing is, and this is important, if you can only do one day a week, don't sign up for a 250-mile ride race.
Fair. Yeah, fair.
Understand that what you sign up for, you have to train for. And so, I think I had to learn, if you're going to sign up for when I was training for the dam,
yeah,
that's a, 240 mile day across Minnesota, 240 miles. That meant that a lot of my training days were going to be 8-hour days. And I was like, oh shit. Okay. Yeah. So just understanding what you sign up for to do means that you're gradually training up to that time frame or whatever. Or if you sign up for a ride with a bunch of elevation, guess what? You're doing a bunch of elevation training. So it's just understanding that part. I think a lot of people miss it and then they DNF in a race and they're like, I don't know what happened. And I'm like, I know what happened. Yeah. I know what happened.
And this is my own, I'm just going to take a dig here. I think you shouldn't sign up for something like that unless you really enjoy riding your bike. Yeah. And so if you don't want to ride your bike more than 2 or 3 hours at a time, then don't sign up for something that's going to take you 12 plus hours.
Right.
That's probably not a good fit. And that's okay. There's no judgment here.
No. I have
don't do things because other people think
right.
Don't do what other people are doing. Do what fits for you and what excites you.
Yeah. I hate when I go to Unbound and people are like, oh, what are you doing? And I'm like, and I do it too. I'll be like, oh, just the 100, right? Because the 200 is the big race. And they're like, just the 100. And I do the same thing. They're like, oh, I just signed up for the 50. I'm like, and I always try and hype them up. Sick, the 50, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because everybody, I know people that they do the 50 in the same amount of time that I do 100.
Right.
Or longer. I think they're the friggin' heroes. That to me would be so miserable. And they don't quit, and the tenacity and just, I'm not going to quit and I'm going to finish it. I love that for them. So understanding what you should do or signing up for what you are capable of doing or able to train for brings more joy to the whole process. Right. So if you're not having fun, you gotta rethink what you're doing and maybe adjust.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which you and I talk about all the time. So
I want to go back to two things real quick. One is just talking about the kids and involving the kids. I think the other, for me, I think the other really important thing here, and this goes for dads and moms, is you're a model, and it's your actions and the things you do. That's going to have a much bigger impact on your kids versus the things you say, right? And so your kids are always watching. And so them seeing you take care of yourself and prioritize yourself and your health and happiness sometimes is going to tell them that it's okay for them to prioritize themselves and their health and happiness. And so I guess I'll go on a little bit more here where I've always been a big believer that endurance sport is an analogy or a metaphor for life. And it's in a concentrated kind of space. But you accomplishing those hard things and doing these hard things, it starts to bleed into other parts of your life. When you persevere, when you accomplish something you didn't think was possible, things like that. It makes you believe that you can do other things that you didn't think were possible. It makes you better able to endure hard times in your life. And so like, that's the other thing, is like being able to like model that. Your kids start to pick up on that. And then the last thing that I just wanted to touch back on is, we've talked about this a lot of times. I always use the analogy of like climbing a mountain. And we have a really bad habit of always looking to the peak and thinking, or the summit. Oh, there's so much like more distance to go. It's so far. But it's like taking the time to stop and turn around and look at how far you've come. And so just going back to like whether it's 6 hours or one ride a week, if you can ride one ride a week and before you're riding 0 rides a week, fantastic. Congratulations. Yeah. Pat yourself on the back, because that's what it's about. It's just like being a little bit better than you were the day before.
Yeah. And remembering too, like my biggest fear for the longest time, because like, I don't even know why, because it's not a bad thing for any like executive women out there or people that put themselves into their career. Like there's nothing wrong with that if that's like what you want to do. But I had this fear that if you asked my kids, like, tell me about your mom, that they would be like, because also I was traveling a lot, that they would say like, was she just like a really cool businesswoman? Like she works really hard. And like, I didn't want to be known for that. Right. Because like, I don't know. There was something about that made me very aware of the possibility of my kids saying that. I think one of them actually did at one point. And so I think the coolest thing that's happened through all this is you ask them now, like if you ask Connor, he's the, 10-year-old, and say, oh, my mom's just she's awesome. She does this, she does that. And it's like multifaceted now.
Right.
And a big part of that is around the biking and the adventures that we've been on together and the things that he's watched me do. Like he was at the bottom of Columbine. He's the only reason, like the reason I kept going and climbed that stupid mountain, even though I missed my cutoff, was because my kid and my coach were at the bottom. And I'm like, I can't do half of the damn mountain and be like, well, so what? Like I always said, like we can do hard things. And so I was like, well, even though I didn't make it, I need to come down and say I made it to the top of this mountain, this hard thing. And I think like he'll tell me now, like, well, I feel like I can do it because like we can climb mountains, we can do this. Like it's like it changes the way that they look at life.
Yeah.
And so as a mom, knowing that now, I just try and tell as many like parents as I can, like there's nothing that's going to be more rewarding than your kid watching you do these hard things. And it, bikes is an example of this, right? But there's other things. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my favorite videos are like the kids at the finish line. If it's a marathon or whatever, like those are going to get me in the feels every single time, because it's my favorite part of seeing, hearing my kids screaming my name, coming down muddy ash Schwamigan or whatever it is that I'm doing. Like it's a big deal. And then tenfold when like Schwamigan this year was completely different for me because Connor raced it too.
Right.
And we were both on course at the same time. So it was also terrifying because like I didn't know where he was or, because I was racing the 40 and he was doing the short. And his face though at the finish, like he had to tell me, not only did I finish, but I beat Grandpa. Like he was so proud of himself. And he was like that's the youngest on course. Yeah. And he, he really loves it. And I see his determination in all things, I just think it's really, really healthy, to show them the way in some of these things. Cause they're going to look at the world, right? Like they're going to encounter hard things. So they have to know
the world is
they'll
hard,
make it through.
Right? It's a hard place. Yeah. It's not always fair. And
no.
So I think that's so important. And I just want to like add a point real quick. Like I think it's super important to let your kids choose to do it versus forcing them to do it. Like
yes.
I mean, I remember being at a kids triathlon one time and there's a dad that like had this kid on like a tricked out tri bike and he's like screaming at him to hurt, like just, and it's like, that's a great way to burn your kids out. And there's like studies that show it, that like kids that specialize too early are like out of the sports by like 14, 17 versus the ones that like try a bunch of different sports and like find love for it, stay in it long term. And so, I just love hearing that it's like him like wanting to do it and, you know,
Well, you remember when we first started riding, I would put notes in my Training Peaks. I'm like, my pace sucked today, and I stopped about 37 times because Connor needs like 37 sips of water on his ride. And so like, and I've even had like a lady yell at me because we were riding. He was going so damn slow, and I was like, come on, like we're 3 miles from home, like come on. And the lady's like gardening, and her little moo-moo, and she's like, geez, he's just a kid. And I'm just like,
he'll never be a champion with that attitude.
So just know that I condone training with your children, but I also would like to acknowledge the frustration that comes with it. You have to go into it knowing like you're likely not going to hit your power targets that day, and you might stop 37 times, but you're out there and you're doing it. And that's just a perfect example of like, be flexible and go with the flow, because you don't want to make it miserable.
But that's part of like, those are some of the things we did too, where it's like you would go do your training ride and then loop back.
Grab him.
Exactly. And like when it was time for the cool down or whatever, and do another like 30 minutes, or on a recovery day, do it. Yep. And so it's like, I think that's the other important thing is that, like, I think a lot of times people think working with a coach that it's going to be like not inflexible. And it's like, oh, you're going to have these workouts and you can't ride with people anymore, and you can't race, you can't do your Zwift race anymore, and you can't like ride with your kids anymore. And I think, again, that's what one of the big jobs is to help you fit in those things. But just like, okay, let's be strategic with it and find out like, when does it make sense to do that Zwift race? When does it make sense to do the social ride and things along those lines?
Yeah, I think coaching in general is like having a secondary conscience, like I've had people like, well, why do you still have a coach? Like, it, does it? And I'm like, well, because once you work with somebody who knows you well and can call you out on your shit, number one, which people have to do for me quite often, but also, when you're making bad decisions or you're putting yourself in a dangerous spot, like having someone there to say this, we need to redirect, or let's think about this differently, is extremely helpful. And will likely save you from hurting yourself at some point, or, making decisions that have lasting effects. And so that course correct, that kind of guide through all of the changes, because it's like you said, it's not linear. It's like this, it's all over the place. And so you need,
right.
You need your, I don't know, Apple Maps to kind of show you the way of, I wanted to say like Rand McNally, but no one knows what that is anymore. So
and you just dated yourself.
I know, it's fine.
Exactly. I always say another big part of the coach is to hold you back like 90% of the time and push you the other 10%. It's to save you from yourself. And it's like, I make bad decisions all the time, and I do things that I would tell athletes, don't ever do this. But it's like having that objective opinion and telling you it's okay to take a rest day today. It's okay, and then other times like, nope, it's like, there's going to be hard times and you need to push through this. And so I think just having that, and it gives you the confidence that you're not just being soft that day or what have you.
No, helps you push through. It's definitely good. And I have had to be pushed through a lot of things. So, like you had said, it was, learning how to eat, and then, figuring out how to just have cadence above 70, and, you kind of progress through different things. And the best feeling in the world now is, when I get out of the saddle for some power and it's there, I'm like, okay, because that's the other thing, when it was happening, was you get out of the saddle for power, it's not there, it's frustrating, you've been working for it. So when you do start to get stronger, it's definitely worth the pain and the effort and the time.
But just to be clear, it's not always there. There are still days where
it's not always
the tank's empty, right? Yeah. And that's okay. It's like,
I will fully admit that 3 or 4 years into training, like I still will cry on the bike. I am that person. I do take it seriously sometimes. And like, if you have a bad day on the bike, it sucks. And I'm lucky enough that I have my boyfriend also rides, and our, trainers are side by side. And a perfect example of this was, we did a Zwift ride the other day, and he's like, oh, you should ride the C category with me. You can do C, right? And I was like, I can do C. I'm going to suck at C, or I can be really good at D. I feel like I should do D. And I didn't listen to myself, and I listened, and I rode the C ride. Full disclosure, I didn't suck as a C in Zwift world. But I didn't keep up with him, and my mindset was to keep up. And so I had a crappy attitude, and then he did call me out. He's like, your attitude kind of sucks right now. And so I think having someone, whether it's a coach or a riding partner or whomever, is going to tell you when your attitude sucks and you need to readjust is important. But it's just a key element to remember, not every ride's going to be great, right? You're going to have 3 great rides, 4 crappy rides, then 4 great rides, 3 crappy rides, and 5 great rides, 2 crap. It's just, it is what it is. That's why I like getting kids on bikes too, though, is it teaches them life's not fair. Sometimes you get a flat and there's nothing you can do about it. Right. And you can't get that time back. You're dealing with it, and it is what it is. But it's hard for adults to learn that too. So it just is.
So what's next for you? What's your next big scary event?
I don't have any big scary events. So the big scary for me is for this year, is riding for fun a little bit more, because I've been very competitive the last year. I did, Leadville the year before, and then I did the Dam and some other ones, a lot of lifetime races last year. So I'm doing a lot of local gravel grinders, just trying to beat my old times. I think I'm going to do, oddly enough, ride the ridges again this year on an actual road bike and see how it feels to do. It's gorgeous. It's a gorgeous course. And then, I'm going to do more adventure riding. So more centuries, but less organized events, I think. And that's, just kind of what my soul needed this year. And then I'm going to pick something really hard for next year, but this year I'm taking kind of I can't call it a break, because I still want to beat my 5,000 miles from last year, but I just think, it'll be less structured, I guess. Yeah. In terms of signing up for races. It's it's expensive to, do some of these events, the fees, and then the housing and the getting there and all that. It's definitely worth it. Some of the events that are put on really well, but I'm just trying to enjoy what I can enjoy for right now.
Yeah. So what advice would you leave anybody listening with, if you could tell them 3 things?
Never say never. I've said never for a lot of things that I have done, and looking back feels very crazy that I doubted myself in that way. So don't sell yourself short. In other words, you're capable of doing lots of things. Like I said, I started riding when I was 35, right? 36, I think. I don't know. I'm turning 40 this year, and I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm in the best spot of my life mentally. Everything the good that I am right now as a human being is because of the time and effort I put in on myself. It's an investment in yourself, whether that's, investing in a coach or investing in a bike or investing in a race. It's worth the investment. Never forget to kind of put yourself first from time to time, and just find a way to have fun. Have fun. It's worth it to get some joy out of it somehow, even zone 2. As much as everyone hates zone 2, that's my thinking time now. Remember when I think I Training Peaks you not too long, I was like, I don't know what you did to me, but I like zone 2 now. It was a switch that happened at some point, and it's I can hold the pace. I know what I'm doing, and I can. That's my thinking time, and so just find joy in it, find purpose in what you can, and
Yeah.
show up for yourself, right?
And I want to say that, like, you and I have talked about this before, not to like derail your insights there, but like, I think that's a big part why your results weren't as fast. I think there's a lot of like training out there that's like sexy and like doing a lot of intensity and stuff like that. And I think it will bring results quickly, but they're shallow is kind of how I look at it, versus doing that long, boring work takes longer, but then you like see bigger results, longer lasting results. And again, your patience and having faith kind of paid off over the course of 3 years. So where can people find you on the social medias?
Well, I primarily do Strava and Instagram. So I don't even know what my handle is. That's how much I care. But I think it's like Megan J Bikes or something like that on Instagram.
I think Megan Justine Bikes.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Megan Justine Bikes on Instagram. And I mainly just post my little adventures and from time to time some witty humor. And then Strava is kind of the other place that everyone is.
Yeah.
That's where I thrive.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed this. And I think moms everywhere will get some value out of it.
Hey, if moms have questions, they can hit me up. I will talk to all the moms and dads. I'm not anti-dad, okay? I'm really not. Or aunts or anyone, right? Like,
just more people.
Anybody who's scared to get on a bike can send me a message, because I promise you are no more or less scared than 90% of anyone else. So
perfect. Great parting words. Thanks again for your time. I enjoyed it.
Of course.